Hello once again from David de Lima, and this week, the 19th of November, we've celebrated the anniversary of President Abraham Lincoln declaring his famous Gettysburg Address. This takes us back to 1863, during the depths of the American Civil War, where perhaps 1 million people, civilian and military, lost their lives. The story begins with Abraham Lincoln being raised in a very poor situation, living there in his one-room cabin with his large family, one window, a dirt floor. He didn't go to school very much, but never allowed that to stand in his way. He practically educated himself. Now, this is an enormous lesson that we can learn from the life of that great fellow, the 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. And I wonder perhaps whether his parents had lofty plans in mind in giving him such an illustrious name, Abraham, who of course would be the father of many nations. And though we don't directly claim him here in Australia or in other countries outside of the United States, nevertheless he helped to build up the United States into the great nation that it has become. And certainly here in Australia we do owe the Americans a great deal of thanks for their tremendous support to us, but to Christian civilization, as Churchill put it, as they came eventually to join into the Second World War and to defeat the powers of totalitarianism. So Lincoln is someone who has helped to shape the modern world, and we can learn many lessons from him personally. If, like all of us, we might from time to time lick our wounds and think about if only this hadn't happened or that hadn't happened, well, he didn't allow his circumstances to get in the way. So he educated himself, and then he tried his hand to business. He failed there miserably. He tried his hand in politics and failed miserably. But once again, there's a tremendous lesson, because behind every successful person are many years lacking success. And in fact, failure is necessary to success when you think about it. And so it's been said famously that if you want to succeed more, you've got to fail more. Interesting thought. Well, Lincoln persevered, and he became eventually President of the United States. A very humble man, not a particularly photogenic man. Once, when he was accused of being two-faced, he said, "If I had another face, do you think I'd be wearing this one?" And he gave a very short speech on the 19th of November 1863 as he dedicated a battlefield as a cemetery. And he said afterwards, or was reputed to have said afterwards, "That won't scour." In other words, that won't scour the plough, or that won't clean the plough. He wasn't very happy with his words. The media at the time thought very little of his remarks and said they were ludicrous and should never be repeated. But in fact, they've become very famous. The Gettysburg Address, short as it is one of the most well-loved speeches of all time, and memorized, no doubt, by millions of American students over the years. Although these days perhaps I'm not sure how much they're memorising about anything, and that's true of students everywhere. 70 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal, and so on the address goes. It only took about 3 minutes to deliver, and was reputedly put together on the back of the envelope. But it's come down to us very importantly. Now, fascinatingly, 1 year after those terrible attacks on the World Trade Center and on the Pentagon, and the fourth plane that was brought down, wrestled down, was heading for Congress. But a year after that, Governor Pataki of New York, wanting to look back into the heritage of the United States to give some meaning to the madness, so to speak, he looked back to the Gettysburg Address and he read that. But I think he read the wrong document, and he really should have read Lincoln's Proclamation Appointing a National Fast Day, which he had issued in March of that year, 1863, because there he declared his view that the calamity of the Civil War may well be God's judgment upon America. And he called not simply for prayer, and yes, they called for prayer after 9/11, but more than that, he called for humiliation and fasting. Would to God that we have today leaders of America and other nations who will not simply call for prayer when things go wrong, but indeed for repentance, for sorrow, and for fasting, humbling ourselves before God and seeking for his deliverance. Now, what is to be done? Well, we can learn lessons from the life of Lincoln. We need to study such worthy Christian individuals as he, commending the faith of those forebears, commending those who were willing to stand up in his case against the wicked injustice of slavery, which was the defining moral crisis of his time. And we need to face the moral crises that are facing our nation and stand up to be counted just like him, even though, sadly, he had to pay the ultimate price. Sometimes that's what you've got to do. But he never wavered from his convictions. Gentle and humble though he was, a very strong Christian statesman. We need to raise up people like that once again. That's my prayer.